Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of The Bills Guys, a Buffalo Fanatics vidcast. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis. I am joined, as always, by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. And once again, Dave, I'm going to say this: we are 53 days away from Buffalo Bills football.
Dude, next show we at what 50, 51, 50, and then from there, man, 50. Once you get under 50, you're only talking a month and a half or so from there. I'm just really hoping that in some form or fashion this season goes on. We all need it, I think. I'm just worried now with all like the new cases of COVID coming up, players testing positive, that there may be some kind of repercussions now as far as delaying the season. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But at the same time, I would also like to think that they kind of figured this was going to happen. You hate to say that, but you had to think that with them reopening things back up, like there wasn't going to be a 100%, no one's going to get this. So we'll see what happens. Let's go. I mean, hopefully everything all good.
Comment section is blowing up here. Love to see it. Pierre's in the house. Dried Ocean is in the house. Elliot's in the house. N. Smith is in the house. Jonathan saying, you guys are saving my Mondays. I've been looking forward to this. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Appreciate that. Andrew apparently is a Cowboys fan, the guy from up top. If you're on YouTube, you saw someone trolling us earlier. So NBC is in the house. So we appreciate you guys all. I am Danny. So thank you guys so much for joining us. And back to that topic of 53 days away from football. Tell me if you think I'm naive here, because
Okay.
I'm obviously clearly not a doctor. I look at my surroundings. I am not an MD. It seems to me almost like most of these cases that are testing positive, they're testing positive because just straight up they're being tested. It's not like these athletes are coughing and being sick and going to the doctor and saying, I think I have coronavirus. They're literally just being tested because of their workplace, testing positive, and they're completely asymptomatic. And the people in the age range that play sports aren't really at risk of ever even being hospitalized from coronavirus. Not to downplay coronavirus, not to say it's not a bad thing, not to say it can't affect people of this age. But that being said, I almost feel like at some point, until we get to a vaccine, what pro sports team is going to be the first team to step up and say, I understand that players are testing positive, but we don't care because they're not actually sick? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure from an ownership standpoint, like they want the show to go on, right? I think what it's going to take players or the players union or something of that nature, like a group of players, a group of like NFL leadership, let's say, like some of the stars of the league, like the Tom Brady's, hate to say that, but like a Tom Brady or an Aaron Rodgers or someone like that, or a group of those guys to come out and say, like, we're not playing under normal circumstances for anything to really probably change drastically. The nature of the sport, you're up in guys' faces, right? I mean, you can put visors on, you can do all this stuff, but like, I mean, this is a sport where you're going to be up in guys' faces, like the linemen, especially, they're facing each other every play. They're clearly not far away from each other. So from that standpoint, you're not going to avoid it, right? If people have it and they're asymptomatic and that happens during the game or even in practices, like it's going to spread, right? But yes, these guys are probably the least likely to feel long-term harmful effects from it. But again, you have to find that balance, right? It's kind of like the balance that the country's trying to find in general between like getting back to some sense of normalcy versus like making sure that this thing doesn't really get out of hand again. So that's going to be the same approach probably they're going to have to take up from the football side. But I would be very surprised if they didn't have a season, I guess, or didn't have some form of a season, just because of the money that's at stake. And we know that the dollar bill kind of drives everything. So that's,
Jeff Ying Yang response here, I think, and again, correct me if you think I'm mistaken here. I think it might be the other way around. He says 99.99% of COVID cases are marked as other illnesses. From what I've been hearing, it's the other way around, where
Mhm.
people are, because someone else commented, there's seems to be something that's causing a false positive for there to be so many positive cases. That's not necessarily true. A lot of people are getting the coronavirus, they're just not showing any symptoms. They're known as
Mhm.
asymptomatic cases. So the
Yep.
virus is in their body, but it's having no effect on them.
Mhm.
And from what I've from the information that I've been gathering, and I don't really go to cable news. I don't really trust everything that they have to say on there. I do my research. I look around. I have reliable sources that I trust. It's that you know this as people get sick, they could get sick again, but there's something called a herd immunity that could develop within the people who are getting sick. So getting it, being asymptomatic, obviously not spreading it to people who are at risk, actually could be good for you in the long run because it helps you build up an immunity. So I'm not a doctor. I'm not trying to get into it, but I think the NFL is gonna. I think of all the leagues, the NFL would be willing to go up against the sort of face of popular, the popular mainstream that says anyone who tests positive, you can't do this, blah blah. I think if there's any league that's willing to go against that norm, I think it's going to be the National Football League.
Yeah, and here's a good comment from N. Smith. My
Mm-hmm.
thought is, if people have the virus, they don't play. Yeah, I mean, you could almost like, if you're the NFL, you could come up with some kind of contingency thing here where you basically create like a separate sort of IR for COVID, uh, COVID cases, right? Like, let's just take Zeke in this example, right? Because we know he tested positive. Let's say Zeke tested positive during the season. Okay, maybe you put him on like a COVID exempt list, you know, for a while, for until he's like, he's over the symptoms or whatever. Until, the problem you're going to have here is like these guys that are asymptomatic, like you said, like, how do you know when it's okay for them to kind of come back? They say the 14-day quarantine and so forth. So maybe you institute like a 2-game or a 3-game mandatory like quarantine from playing. I mean, it's possible, but it's just like you're starting to kind of get into some tricky situations here. You still have to pay the players, I'm sure, and things like that. So, but it's an idea, so we'll
Mm-hmm.
see.
All right. So Corey here in the comments section mentioned winner, winner, chicken dinner. So if you guys haven't noticed, every week for the most part, there's been, I believe, 2 shows where me as host slash producer has failed to live up to my job of putting this banner at the bottom of the screen here. But you'll notice at the bottom of the screen, it says that Corey is our monthly super chat winner. So every month, if you are a super chatter within that month, we will put your name into a sort of raffle. We will draw out a name randomly. This month, Corey has won. So Corey, shoot us an email at the Bills guys at gmail.com. We will let you pick out any t-shirt you want in the Buffalo Fanatics store. We will get your address and we will make sure it gets mailed out to you. So Corey is the lucky winner. And since I was supposed to have done this last week, and we had 5 people on the show from the Hoof podcast, and I was so worried about being a facilitator and a host that I wasn't thinking about you guys as much, and I apologize for that. We decided to pick 3 more names. Now, those 3 names do not win anything, unfortunately, but the 3 names at the bottom, Mike Schiavi, Jeffrey Green, and Stephen Campione, you guys are still in the running for next month's raffle. So you guys, even if you don't super chat this month, will still be eligible for next month's drawing. So I'm putting an additional 3 names in there for a chance to win next month as sort of my apology to you guys, the loyal listeners. But again, these are for our super chatters. Our super chatters are killing it. Our regular listeners are killing it. Everyone's been killing it. We've been enjoying our show so much. So that's what we're going to do right now. We are going to hop into our first topic for the evening, and that is going to be running backs.
Yep.
Inspired by Sterling over there at the Hoof podcast. He tweeted out something and he tagged us both in it, I believe. And there was a nice long conversation going on Twitter with a whole bunch of members of the Buffalo Bills community talking about Devin Singletary's projections for the season. And it got my mind racing thinking about the running game, because last week we talked about Josh Allen and the over-under on touchdowns for Josh Allen in 2020. I mentioned on the show 19.6 points per game is what we were scoring last year. Wasn't good enough. It needs to get up into that 24 to 26 range to be like just all the other playoff teams. So in order to do that, we got to go from the 29 touchdowns Josh Allen gave us last year, the 4 rushing touchdowns we have, and the 2 other touchdowns, one from a John Brown pass and one from a Micah Hyde special teams touchdown, into that 45 to 50 range. So the question now becomes, what role do the running backs play in this? Are they going to be a secondary character in all of these touchdowns that we need? Or are they going to be a main factor in increasing that touchdown workload? So what are your thoughts and your projections for the running backs heading into 2020? And more, you guys, listeners, hit us up with your projections in the comments section as well.
So I like this topic, right? Because we're talking about touchdowns a little bit, but I also want to just take like a little bit of a step back and talk a little bit about the rushing attack under the McDermott era as a coach. So 3 seasons, right? Going back to 17 when we had Tyrod. The Bills have been a top 10 rushing team, and each of the 3 seasons McDermott's been the head coach. Now, and each of those seasons, obviously, we've had a little bit of a boost in that production because our quarterbacks have all been running quarterbacks. Tyrod had nearly 500 yards in 2017. Josh led the team in 2018 with over 600 yards. And, last year we kind of had a mixed bag between Frank Gore and Singletary. Josh added another 500 plus. But what it all amounts to at the end of the day is that the Bills as a team over the last three seasons are hitting that top 10 or better mark in the league in rushing, and they're getting right around 2,000 or so rushing yards a season. So if we think about it that way, right, and we think about maybe Josh's going to kind of put up another 500 to 600, that's kind of been his couple years average has kind of been in that 500 to 600 range. We're talking about another 1,400 yards coming from running backs, and when you talk about that, you're thinking like, okay, well, you got Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. What's that split going to be, that 1,400 yards, if we want to be back to kind of in that top 10 range? So I think Singletary is going to have a little bit more, maybe 800, but I don't think we're going to have a clear, runaway bell cow, I guess I would say. I don't think you're going to see Singletary in that like 1,400 yard range. I think, 1,000 yards is reasonable for him, maybe another 500 for Moss, maybe it's like 800, 600, something like that. But the touchdowns, and that's what you mentioned, the touchdowns are where we need the help, right? Last year, I think we only had 5 rushing touchdowns from running backs, if I'm not mistaken. And that number's got to go up, right? We talk about getting the 23 to 24 points a game. And we talk about that. And what that really means is if Josh Allen gets those touchdowns that we talked about last week, that 30 to 34, the running backs are going to have to account for at least 10 touchdowns. So how that splits out, I don't really know. 5 apiece, 6-4, 7-3, whatever, right? But I'm saying as a group, the running backs need to be getting 10 touchdowns around that number or more for us to be where we want to be on a points per game basis.
All right. Well, the man himself has chimed in, Rico, with the super chat. We really appreciate it, Rico. He says, give a shout out to David and Steve. He says, y'all are cute, which is interesting choice of adjectives. Rico, my real question for you is, what's the exchange rate with that Canadian in $5? That's what I want to know. But thank you. We appreciate it. A lot of people there in the comments section. I see a lot of people scrolling up here. Jonathan asked if we can possibly have 2,000-yard rushers. Ray asks, if the running game works, we should stick to it. There was another person, a lot of people who are predicting Devin Singletary to go against what you're saying and get over 1,000 yards. This person here says 1,100 for Motor, 700 for Moss. That's 1,800 yards. And, I hate to go against the grain of the viewers here, but I just don't think that that's possible. I don't know if Singletary goes over 1,000, if it's possible for Motor to get anywhere near 700 yards, because, Dable didn't. We how many times did we have this conversation last year? Brian Daboll didn't run the football enough. Brian Daboll wasn't consistent enough running the football. And now you're adding Stephon Diggs to the mix. And now you have more wide receivers to feed in the passing game. Last year, Frank Gore averaged 10 carries per game. Devin Singletary averaged 13 carries per game. So for these guys to get to 1,000 yards, it's going to be, if they get the same amount of carries as last year, it's going to take vastly more yards or carries per game, attempts per game. And I just don't know if that's possible. I think Devin Singletary could easily reach 1,000. And here's where I'm going to get with that. I think Pierre says, Devin was known as the bell cow in college. I think Devin Singletary is going to get 80% of the touches to start the year. I think he is going to be a 15 to 20 carry a game guy to start the season because I don't think the Buffalo Bills are going to be comfortable giving Zach Moss the football. That's going to give Devin Singletary the edge to getting towards 1,000 yards. And I would put my money on Devin Singletary, barring injury, getting to 1,000 yards. I shouldn't have said I don't think either are going to get 1,000 yards. I think Devin Singletary will get to 1,000 yards. But these people who are saying Zach Moss, 600, 700 yards, 2,000-yard rushers, I just don't know how feasible that is because I don't know. McDermott has made those comments before. Other people have made those comments before within the Bills coaching staff. We don't want to rush these guys in because of COVID. They're rookies. Who knows how much we can use them? So it's going to be like that Matt Milano, Levi Wallace effect where they're going to be used sparingly to start. And my prediction is Singletary gets 80. It's 80-20 Singletary Moss early. And then by weeks 8 or 10, it turns into a 60-40 split. So I definitely wouldn't be surprised to get Devin Singletary over 1,000 yards. I wouldn't be surprised, if he gets 6 to 10 touchdowns. That I think could almost practically be a given. But the Zach Moss, the 2,000-yard rushers, the double-headed monster, these two just rumbling and stumbling all over teams and ground and pound, and it's like Alabama running all over people back in the national championship games before they had a quarterback. I just don't think that's feasible because I just don't think we're going to run the ball enough for that to happen. So thank you, Ryan, for the super sticker, and I'm sorry to the people in the mentions. My prediction would be Devin Singletary, 800 to 1,200 yards, 6 touchdowns. Zach Moss somewhere in the 400 to 500 range and 4 touchdowns. Those things can obviously change due to injury. If Josh Allen struggles, we could end up running the ball more, which I hope he doesn't. So it's all dependent, I think. But, a lot of these things I think are dependent on just the sheer number of carries that they're going to be given.
Yeah, and I mean, Rico is right here, right? Gore had almost 600 yards, Singletary 775, Allen over 500. Again, as a team, we were right around that 2,000-yard mark, and we were 9th in the NFL in rushing. Like, are we going to really improve upon that all that much? Like, we average about 130 yards on the ground a game. In a typical season, around 140, 160 yards per game gets you tops in the NFL. Last year, the Ravens were an anomaly, obviously, with Lamar Jackson having over as a team over 200 a game, but the next closest team after them was the 49ers. They were second with 144. So our team already with a 600-yard rusher, a 775-yard rusher, and a 500-yard rushing quarterback, plus sprinkle in a few other third stringers here and there. I mean, you're already talking about that's getting you to like 2,000 yards and top 10 in the NFL. So where's that extra 20? Are we gonna see a jump of another 20 yards a game, putting us like towards the top of the NFL in rushing? I just don't know because, again, like you mentioned, with Diggs and the passing game hopefully opening up, is there just gonna be enough rushes to go around to get us to that number? We'll see.
Yeah, because I mean, Rico said Gore had 599, Devin had 775. Their Moss should be an upgrade over Gore, not because Gore was a bad player, but just because there was a lot of tread on those tires. Devin's going into year 2, he should be a better player, but just as you mentioned, like, just because they're better football players doesn't mean that they're going to get more carries. And unless we try to run the ball more, maybe take some of those carries away from Josh Allen and give them to the running backs, I can picture Devin Singletary going over 1,000. I feel pretty confident predicting and betting on Devin Singletary going over 1,000 if healthy. But it's the Zach Moss when you're talking about the Zach Moss getting into the 6, 7, 800 yards. That's what scares me because I just don't know if the carries are going to be there. But we got some really, really good mentions here. Jonathan mentioned sort of what I said. Is it possible that Josh Allen design run plays become fewer with the addition of Moss? I think so. Who knows? Maybe we let Zach Moss take the brunt of it at the goal line instead of risking our franchise quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Corey has mentioned something we've mentioned on this show in the past. Diggs is a deep threat. He's going to keep safeties out of the box. So maybe, Pierre's onto something. At 10 carries per game, Gore had 599 yards. What if Zach Moss can improve the yards per carry? Same with Devin Singletary. What if he just gets 13 touches a game again, which I don't think he will. He'll probably get more. But what if he can improve the yards per carry because of everything else? So maybe the running game, there isn't more volume, but there's more efficiency. So I can buy where Rico's coming from with some of the evidence that Corey's bringing here. I just don't know if I'm willing to bet heavy money on it because I just don't know if those attempts are going to be there.
Yeah, and let's say the attempts are there. Maybe he does improve on his efficiency. Maybe Moss does improve on Gore's efficiency and gets another 2 to 3 carries a game. But that's going to either come at the expense of Josh Allen runs or Devin Singletary runs. Like I just don't, unless we're just become this like super run oriented team where like we're 60-70% running the ball. I just don't think the attempts are going to be enough because I mean think about Allen, right? Like he's obviously bringing those efficiency numbers up with his runs, right? He's the most efficient runner on the team statistically by yards per carry. So I don't know. I think it's reasonable to expect like if Allen does run the ball less, let's say there are less design runs for him. Maybe he's back in that 300 to 400 yard range rushing. Okay, then maybe I could see like a 800 to 900 yard, like 1,000 yards from Singletary, and maybe another 600-700 from Moss. But I just don't see them both getting close to 1,000.
Yeah. Amy, she's always watching. She's always under the radar. She very rarely comments, but when she does, it's always a great comment. So she says, "I think Singletary will be a stud this year." I agree with you. Like, let's put the fan goggles on for a second and just talk about like there were some Devin Singletary highlights that got shared on one of those big Twitter handles recently. It was those broken tackles he had against Houston. I can't remember the name of the Twitter handle, but they shared it. They said Devin Singletary is going to blow up this year. As Corey was mentioning, as we've been talking in years past, like Devin Singletary is going to get to the second level this year, and he's going to go up against guys who it's a lot easier to break tackles from. Safeties, linebackers, corners. So it wouldn't surprise me if the Bills are forced to run the ball more this year because Devin Singletary makes them run the ball more this year. Well, I'm talking this guy just comes out and plays lights out. He shows you that blend of like the Kamara that we were talking about. Maybe I'm trying to think of another guy who's just so good after contact and so good sort of at the second level like Devin Singletary showed in spurts last year. I'm trying to think of a comp. I can't think of one off the top of my head right now, but what if he comes out and he just blows up? And he's averaging 6, 7, 8 yards per carry. You just have to give him the ball more. So totally with you there, Amy. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the year we're talking about Devin Singletary as the most valuable player in this offense, just because his stats really could blow up with all the other talent taking pressure off of him.
Yeah, and Smith makes a comment here. Singletary Moss could be like Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams. One thing I would say about that,
19 touchdowns last year, I'll take it.
Yeah, I would say I actually think Moss is probably a better talent than Jamal Williams, although Jamal Williams is certainly a serviceable number 2. Aaron Jones is a guy that's like really an all-around guy, good receiver, good running back. I would like to see maybe if that's the case, see Devin Singletary get involved more in the passing game. I think a few people have made comments around getting him involved in the screen game, and we've made comments in the past around Josh potentially using his backs more. Kareem Hunt, that's an interesting comp for Singletary, but
he's got about 20 pounds on Singletary, I believe. Yeah,
he's a little bigger. So moves wise, okay. I mean, maybe.
Yeah. There were some people who wanted to throw some Kareem Hunt comps at Zach Moss. I don't know if Zach Moss is that explosive, but there were some people willing to make that comp in the pre-draft process. So maybe Zach Moss can by week 8 or 9 make himself known as well.
Yeah, I mean, I still like the Kamara comp. I mean, it's like Kamara's a little taller, but weight-wise, he's not all that much heavier than a guy like Singletary. And what's great about Kamara, his balance, right? That's what we always see. Kamara kind of sneaking through the line. He's got that great balance, and that's what Singletary has. So, not a bad comp there.
Mm-hmm.
Elliot comments here. The Bills are built like the 2015 Panthers, and they had a hell of a two-headed beast in the backfield. Yeah, that's true.
It was Jonathan Stewart. Who was the other one?
Jonathan Stewart. It wasn't D'Angelo was gone by that time, right?
No, I think it was D'Angelo. I think it was D'Angelo.
D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart.
Yeah. There was another comment here. Let me see. Who is it? Who's the bigger receiving threat, Moss or Singletary? I will say this, NBC, from everything we were told about Devin Singletary coming out of college, he wasn't used a lot as a receiver. Now, he was impressive as a rookie, but he did have some drops. He did have the occasional drop and things like that. Zach Moss is actually, believe it or not, even though he's a north-south runner, the reason why he was getting some of those Kareem Hunt comps in the pre-draft process was because of his soft hands and his ability to run routes in the short to intermediate. So I'm going to maybe step out of the realm of what maybe most people would say, because Singletary showed a lot of flashes. I think more so in the preseason and the regular season last year as a receiver. But I'm going to say I think Zach Moss is probably the better receiver of the two.
Yeah, people are mentioning Mike Tolbert in the comments as part of that the backfield for the Panthers. Mike Tolbert of Bills fame as well.
TJ Yeldon's going to have to pack on some weight. Christian Wade's going to have to gain 50 pounds. You think Christian Wade can pack it on?
No.
Rico says, who? I see that backdrop, Steve. I see you, pimp. But just so everyone's aware, I do live with my fiance. So while I have my nice history books right here, this is the Twilight series up here in this bookshelf. So no judgment if you can actually read that. I probably shouldn't have said
But you know what? You know what I like about that is you're not going to see, with all these people on Zoom and all these people like the reporters and stuff at their homes, you're going to probably be the only guy that has that Twilight series up there. Yeah. And so that's a unique piece there for you to have in your backdrop.
And if there's any Twilight fans out there, I'm not making fun of you. I'm sure it is plenty good. Vampires are just not my thing. All right, so I think that just about does it for the running backs here, Dave. And I think that's also might be a record for us, the quickest we've ever gotten through our topics for the day. So I'm quite frankly proud of us. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to quickly let you guys know about the Buffalo Bills store, bffanshop.com. If you head over to bffanshop.com, you can get any of the Buffalo Fanatics gear, and you can look just as good as Corey will look within 7 to 12 business days when he gets his Buffalo Fanatics gear. So it's bffanshop.com, 10% off using the promo code BillsGuys. If you are looking for the Buffalo versus everybody gear, it's not over at the BF Fan Shop. You're going to have to follow the link on all our social medias. It's through a different company. So if you're looking through that Buffalo versus everybody gear, unfortunately, you won't get that Bills Guys discount. But there's plenty of other great things at the BF Fan Shop. So head over to bffanshop.com, get 10% off any of your Bills gear, using the promo code BillsGuys. All right.
Oops. I wanted to give that shout out to Amy there, making a comment on your mug. I really would like one of those, actually. So hopefully there's one on the way for me.
I believe there is the mugs at the Buffalo Fanatics Fan Shop. So head over to the BF Fan Shop, and I believe you can buy these mugs there as well. All right, ladies and gentlemen.
Quick before we move on, I want to just give you the credit where credit is due, and Daniel is giving you credit. You're the only one to admit to having the Twilight movies, so you deserve some credit.
These are the books. These are the books. They're not the movies.
Either way, you've got the books. You've got some kind of media there for Twilight. So I like it.
I just wanted to let people know I could read. That's pretty much where I was going with this setup here.
All right, let's get in on the questions. So let's start with Jonathan. Sorry, I pulled this question down earlier just to put this comment up there, but let's get to Jonathan's question first. So it's a good segue from talking about the running backs. So the question is, do we see the screen game opening up more this year? And I know we've talked about this a little bit, so I'm going to let you start with this one. What do you think?
I just don't know if that's something that's in Brian Daboll's repertoire. Like, don't get me wrong. I'd have to go back and do some research. I believe New England used it. I don't think it was a staple of what New England's done. And I know Daboll comes from that New England system. it'll be interesting to see. I think we got the guys to do it. Deion Dawkins can pull, Mitch Morse can pull, John Feliciano's got the ability to do it. Cody Ford's a little, flat-footed. If he was playing on the inside, I would maybe say he could pull a little bit more. And I know Quentin Spain's not the best at it. So I'm going to say that I wouldn't be surprised if they tried it. But if it doesn't have any semblance of success early, I think they're going to go away from it and not bring it back. So I hope so. I really do hope so. Someone in the comments here, Andrew Miller, mentioned Mike Gillisley. Like, remember when that guy caught a screen pass and would just run for days and days and days? I wish we could do that with a guy like Devin Singletary and a guy like Zach Moss. So from a fan standpoint, God, I hope so. Like, God, I hope so. It's easy yards in the National Football League if you can do it correctly. And when you can take teams by surprise, there are players on this team that can take the ball to the house and get big chunk plays from it. But I just don't know from a Brian Dable standpoint if that's something that's possible.
Yeah, I mean, look, we know the Pats the Pats have been a big screen team over the years. They use James White like that all the time in the screen game. But, it's one thing we haven't really seen much out of the Bills with Daboll at the helm. Now, we mentioned getting the running backs more involved in the passing game to help Josh Allen out. So maybe that's not necessarily even the form of the screen game, right? Maybe that's like some of those arrow routes that we used to see with Fred Jackson, with Chan Gailey, something like that, right? Where we see the running backs get in a little bit more involved in the passing game. Maybe it's not necessarily screens, but it's something where we maybe like use them more on design routes more so than screens. But we heard it from Josh Allen. He's not going to be captain check down. He said that. But that doesn't necessarily mean the screen game is a check down, right? If it's a design pass. So we'll see. I'm not overly optimistic that we're going to all of a sudden become a huge screen team, although I'd like to see them use the running backs more in the passing game.
All right. Do we got anything? All right. Oh, sorry. You had one?
Sorry. Yeah, it's fine. We can go back to it. So Jay Davis says, I love the logo there, Jay, by the way. It's a nice, clean, classic logo you've got. Do you think Singletary will be a 3-down back, or will Moss come in on 3rd down? Wow. I think early in the season, he probably will be more of a 3rd down back than he will be, or more of a 3-down back than he will be as the season progresses. But I don't necessarily think that we should pigeonhole Singletary into early downs and Moss into 3rd down for the entirety of the season. I think you could see them alternating series down the line, kind of like what they did with Frank Gore last year. Moss gets a series, Singletary gets a series as Moss gets more comfortable as the season wears on. So I think from the Bills standpoint, it's great, right? Because I think in the long term, they could use either guy on early downs or use either guy on 3rd downs. Now, Moss is probably going to be the better pass protector, but I think it's fair game to think that either one of them could play on early downs.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I think it's going to be Singletary early, but it's definitely something that Moss can grow into as the weeks progress. And Smith says, "Oops, we all know that our tight end room is bad, but do you think Knox will become more of a third?" I don't know if it's bad. I think the word to describe it would be average with upside, because you look at a guy like Tommy Sweeney. Tommy Sweeney, towards the end of that depth chart, is going to be a career number 2, number 3 tight end. A guy who's always going to be able to block for you, a guy who can give you a catch or two here or there in some clutch moments, a guy who can fill in as a starter. I'm very content with Tommy Sweeney at the back half of this depth chart. Jason Kroom is a guy at the back half of this depth chart with some upside. Tyler Kroft, if he can ever stay healthy, can maybe give you something. But let's get back to the main feature here that you're talking about, and that is Dawson Knox. We talk about the running game and supplementing the running game. If Isaiah McKenzie doesn't make this football team, we ran one play last year where we ran a jet sweep to Dawson Knox. I believe it was in the Bengals game. And boy, was that play fun, because he took that end around, he ran, and he just bowled somebody over. So I would like to see the ball. Jonathan mentioned in the comment section getting Stephon Diggs the ball more on screen plays. Josh Allen has playmakers. He doesn't have to do everything himself. So if he can work on not like gunning the ball to these guys in the short area, get the ball in Diggs' hands at the line of scrimmage, get the ball in Dawson Knox's hands at the line of scrimmage, get the ball in Singletary and Moss's hands at the line of scrimmage. Even if it's not a screenplay, just get them the ball and let them run. So Dawson Knox, while I believe he's very raw, he's more of an athlete than a tight end at this point. And maybe he got rushed into some things he wasn't ready for. And I say, hey, like, let's keep the training wheels on this guy. Let's not overdo him. Let's not do all this and that. At the same time, with Diggs on one side and Brown on the other side and Beasley working the middle and the threat of Singletary and Moss running the football, Dawson Knox could blow up this year because he's got the athletic ceiling of some of the best tight ends in the National Football League. He really does. It's not me being hyperbolic. He literally does. So, if he can work on his focus and his hands in the offseason and there's less pressure on him, and when he catches the football, there is more space in front of him to do what we've seen he can do with the ball in his hands this year, he could end up being one of the players in this offense we were like, damn, why weren't we talking about him more in the offseason? So I'm not that low on our tight end room, especially Dawson Knox.
Yeah, and I mean, if you watch last week's show, we went roundtable and kind of said which second-year guy was going to break out, and I picked Knox as my guy because I think the middle of the field is going to be opened up a little bit more with Diggs now on the opposite side of Brown, where Brown was really the only kind of threat on the outside we had last year because we all know Robert Foster didn't do much. McKenzie's not really an outside guy, so now with Diggs and Brown, Beasley and Knox should have room in the middle of the field, should have room for Yak. I think our tight end group is actually, it's middle of the pack, maybe like slightly below average from NFL standpoint, but it's got upside, and that's why I like Daniel's comment here. Knox and Sweeney have upside. Sweeney's got good hands for a guy that's known primarily as like a blocking guy, didn't get a lot of run at Boston College as a receiver, but has great hands. And Knox is the guy that if he develops could be a complete tight end. So you look around the NFL, like how many teams really have like the guys that maybe have the teams that maybe have like that super elite tight end, like what's the depth behind that? There's not a lot of like great tight end rooms, I feel like, in the NFL. Some teams are fortunate to have that super elite guy, but like how's their top to bottom group look? We have a lot of different skill sets in that group. So it could be a group that surprises a bit this year.
Amy comments again, Amy's the MVP today, commenting Knox with those angry runs. I think I mentioned this a couple of shows ago. I've been studying Baker Mayfield's rookie tape, and everyone thinks that's really weird, but it's because I remember a couple of years ago watching one of those NFL film studies, and they talked about how they use trips wide receivers on one side of the field and how it opened up the other side of the field for Duke Johnson and for David Njoku. So picture a world where Beasley, Brown, and Diggs are all on one side of the field, and Dawson Knox is lined up over the right tackle, and they're all over on the left side of the field. We're talking, you're not going to have a corner on Dawson Knox. You're going to have a linebacker, and the safety's not going to be thinking about Dawson Knox. The safety's going to be thinking about the three wide receivers on their side of the field. So Dawson Knox can go down the field. Josh Allen can throw him jump balls. Dawson Knox can stand there and wait for a screen pass, and when he catches that screen pass, he'll only have one guy to beat an entire side of the field open because the three wide receivers are on the other side. So if the Bills can use those three receivers as a threat on one side of the field, it could open up that other side of the field for guys like Dawson Knox and Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, the way it did Baker Mayfield's rookie year for David Njoku and for Duke Johnson and Nick Chubb. And let me tell you, those guys just caught the ball and ran. There was a lot of yards after catch in Baker Mayfield's rookie year just from using that trip set alone.
This is a really fun question from Pierre here, or from Rico, excuse me. Pierre's commenting on it in the comment section, but I'd like to see what other people think about this too in the comment section. So the question is, weakest position group on the team and also the strongest position group on the team. This is gonna be fun. So do you have any knee-jerk reaction to this right off the top of your head? Weakest position group, strongest position group. Yeah,
I finally get a chance to bring it back, but that special teams hate punters. Come on, Hard Vedvik. You had all off season. You still have $20+ million in cap space.
This guy hates punters, man.
There are still veterans sitting out on the street, like Ryan Allen. I believe Matt Bosch are still out there, and you're telling me Corey Vedvik and Corey Bojorquez is the best you can do? I'm sorry, give me a break. That's the weakest position by a mile. By a mile.
Man, yeah, I mean, I think so. I think that, to be honest with you, like, this one's tough for me to say what's the weakest, but I don't know. You can make the argument that our offensive tackles are fairly weak. You can make the argument that tight end room is weak, although we just talked about the upside. I'm not going to say linebackers. There's a couple comments there saying linebacker just because when you have two studs like Milano and Edmonds, you can't say that's the weakest group, even if the depth behind them is not. So I guess, I mean, to me, it might be the tackles with Ford and Dawkins. Like, I like Dawkins. He's great for the locker room. He's a serviceable left tackle in the NFL, and we'll see about Ford. Like, I have all the high hopes for him, but I'm not super confident in that group as a whole. Strongest group now.
Well, hold up, because Pierre says kickers are people too. And I would like to say, you know what? Sure, kickers are people too, but you know who aren't? Punters. Punters are not people.
Punters don't fall in the realm of overall kickers. We're separating place kickers and punters. Okay, I got you. Strongest group. I mean, safety. I don't like. There's wide receiver. You can make an argument. Wide receiver is the strongest group. I'm gonna say on offensive side of the ball, wide receivers. On defensive side of the ball, safety. I'll say that'll be my way to answer that question.
Because you think of the Buffalo Bills, and this is one of the deepest rosters they've had in years, and all of these things. But it's the question you have to ask yourself is: are you worried about depth? Are you worried about, like, how much does depth play a role in answering this question? How much does star power play a role in answering these questions? So because of that, because I am more of the star power, how about let's go with Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde? I'm going to say the safeties. Buffalo Fanatics put out a great graphic on Instagram and Twitter today.
Love it.
I mean,
safeties.
over the last 3 years, you cannot say that there's been a better safety duo in the National Football League, period, than Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. The way those two work off each other, the plays those two make is unbelievable. So the fact that, and I wish I had the statistics in front of me. I don't, but it was 3 year span. It's over all the Buffalo Fanatics social media. There's only 2 Buffalo Bills on that list of accumulated stats over 3 years. Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer. So every time ESPN, Fox Sports, NFL memes, whatever, does their rankings of best safety duos in the NFL, where the hell are Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer? Not even to get top 5 consideration. That's just straight disrespectful. And it has 100% thing, has to do with contract, has to do with market, has to do with star power. It's ridiculous. Our safety group, give me Micah Hyde, give me Jordan Poyer. I wouldn't take, despite the fact that there might be more talented, legitimate number 1 safeties in the league, I wouldn't take any other safety group in the NFL above the one we have here in Buffalo. I think Jaquan Johnson is going to be a guy that they can groom to come in and replace Jordan Poyer someday. I think Dean Marlowe is probably one of the more underrated role players in the National Football League. I mean, this guy came off the street 2 years ago on multiple occasions, played pretty solid. This is a guy who's just sat at the back half of our roster, and every time he's on the football field, he doesn't embarrass himself. And then we're talking about our boy Saran Neal. I love Saran Neal. I was all on the Saran Neal train last offseason. We didn't get Kyle Duggar. We didn't get that big nickel we want. I expect a bigger role for Saran Neal this year. And I know that some people might want to consider Saran Neal and Dean Marlowe corners because of the way the Bills use them, but I still consider them hybrid players in that secondary. I will tie them in with the safeties, and I will say the safeties are the best group on this team, and they are massively disrespected in the National Football League.
Yeah, you know me. I love me some Jaquan Johnson. I'm still waiting for that. I'm waiting for him to break out a little bit, get some playing time. But it's fine. If he's not getting playing time, that means Hyde and Poyer rolling.
I need a new jersey. I need a new jersey number for Jaquan Johnson.
Yeah.
Last I checked, I don't think anyone had dibs on 29. I'd like to see Jaquan Johnson in that 29 jersey. That's the first thing I do when I play Madden, is I straight up go to Jaquan Johnson and change his number. 46 ain't working for him. 46 ain't working for him. He needs a new number.
Yeah, 46 is not a great number. It's more of like a Pat DeMarco friend buddy number. There's been a lot of comments, and I'll pull up Elliot's here. There's been a lot of comments talking about the D line as a whole, I think, as a strong unit. So if we're going to parse this out and talk about D tackles and D end, do you give any consideration to either of those groups as being in the running for strongest group on the team?
They're a strong group. They're probably the most. They probably have the most depth. I mean, like at some positions, they're 3 deep at starter. But I don't know, outside of what Ed Oliver can be. I don't. And people have heard me talk about Mario Addison and my love for Mario Addison here, but we haven't seen it yet. So I'm going to say, despite all of the talent there, I want to see some more from that room before I crown them above safeties. But I mean, we're talking about Look at left end: Trent Murphy, Quentin Jefferson, AJ Epinesa. That's 3 deep. Right end, you got Mario Addison, Jerry Hughes. That's 2 deep. 3 technique defensive tackle. You have Ed Oliver. You have Vernon Butler, and you have Quentin Jefferson that you can throw in there. 5 technique. You have, or maybe it's 1 technique. 5 technique, 1 technique. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on what's called the 1 technique. You have Starlo Delele, Harrison Phillips, and Vincent Taylor. So, I mean, I just named 3-4 guys at every single position on the defensive line. So if depth is where you're going from, is what your priority is when saying it's the strongest position, by all means, go defensive line. But in terms of the star power, I think Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer set the safeties apart.
Yeah, I think from a star power standpoint, they do. And then if we didn't have AJ Klein there in that strong side spot, I'd love to consider the linebackers here with Edmonds and Milano. We get Voshan coming up. Maybe he kind of gives the linebackers some credit there if he can kind of get it together, and maybe the linebackers become one of those groups. Here's this is one that we kind of touched on a little bit last week, but it's more of a fun one. We don't need a safety, but what if we made a trade for Jamal Adams? I think we talked about this a little bit last week, right? Well, number one, it's probably not realistic. He could play big nickel. He's friends with Trey. We know that, both LSU guys. So you got that going for you. But interdivision trade, it's not going to happen. And I think even the Jets came out today and made some stupid comment about, like, we're not doing anything with Jamal Adams trade demands. So that's a incendiary situation, I'll say, which is not a bad thing for us as Bills fans. But hey, look, Jamal Adams gets traded, and he gets traded outside of the AFC maybe. And hey, I'm not gonna complain. I like Jamal Adams, the player. I think he's got a great edge to him. I think he'd be awesome to have on our team. I just don't think it's gonna happen.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, Trey White, Matt Milano, Deion Dawkins, Josh Allen, Tremaine Edmonds, these are all guys that you're going to have to start paying within the next 2 to 3 years. Not to mention, I've seen a trade going around that I think works. It's Michael Gallup and a first-round pick and maybe some more mid-rounders to Dallas. That's a trade that makes sense, but that's the only feasible trade in the National Football League I can see that would net the New York Jets anything less than two first-round draft picks. Our guys at Bills Overdue were talking about it. Like, if they're not getting 2 first-round draft picks, people are going to start being like, what the hell are they doing? So unless you want to give up 2 first-round draft picks for a big nickel, then have to pay him a massive amount of money. And then on top of that, lose players like Matt Milano or Deion Dawkins or Trey White because you can't afford them.
Right.
I just can't envision it. Love the player, but we're going into a point in our build in this process where it's not going to be let's go chase these studs. It's going to be let's develop studs, let's pay our own, and let's be frugal and efficient in free agency, and let's collect supplemental picks. Like, we are going to be over the next 1-2 off seasons, that sort of philosophy is going to be changing. It's not going to be shooting for Stephon Diggs. It's not going to be trading up in the draft for Tremaine Edmonds and Josh Allen. It's not going to be all these things. It's not going to be signing 19 free agents in an off season. It's going to be frugal in free agency. Make those big trades only absolutely when it's just you have to do it. Like, straight up, the player is just that good. Like, it's going to be a completely different way of team building that we're going to see from this team. So, I can't envision A, the Jets trading Jamal Adams into the division, and B, the Bills willing to give up what they need to give up in terms of what they want to do with their future.
Yeah, we know Bean loves draft picks. He's going to look to recoup that 4th somehow that we lost in the Diggs trade. So maybe that comes via supplemental a year down the road. We'll see. Here's a good one from Jay Davis. Question coming in. We talked about this a little bit. Are there any free agents you see us targeting? Clowney, Griffin, Ryan, etc. I think he's referring to Everson Griffin and Jadeveon, obviously. And we talked about this, right? Like, I think that in order for the Bills to make a move like that, sign a Clowney or a Griffin, that it means the end of Trent Murphy's time here in Buffalo, given the cap hit we're currently facing with him. You loved the idea of bringing in Griffin for 1 year, considering that Murphy's only got 1 year left. Like, save that $7-8 million, pay Griffin 10, 11. You're only really paying 3 more than you would have been paying Trent Murphy. Do you get that big of an upgrade by having Everson Griffin? Maybe you do. Clowney, I mean, I would love to see Clowney on this team. He's a game wrecker. He's a guy that can turn the tide of a game in one play, but we know the injury history he's had, and I think he's probably going to be looking, I don't know if his stance has changed, but he's probably looking for a multi-year deal, and I'm not sure he's going to get it. But Clowney is a game changer when healthy, right? Now, his sack numbers weren't great last year with the Seahawks, but it's just one of those things. Now you drafted Epinesa, you brought in Addison. Like, I don't know that this is going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a standpoint of the front office, I think the AJ Epinesa slipping to them in the second round put all this to bed, because I don't even think they actually know what they're going to do with AJ Epinesa yet. You got Quentin Jefferson, you have AJ Epinesa, you have Trent Murphy, you have a whole bunch of guys, Mario Addison, you have a whole bunch of guys that you're already trying to rotate. Don't get me wrong, me as a fan, for the right price on a one-year deal, like there's no harm, I think, in bringing in a guy like Clowney or Griffin. I see those DBs in there. I think Sean McDermott's comfortable with the secondary. I think he likes the secondary. If Denard or Ryan fit that big nickel role, which neither of them do, I think we could have a conversation about it, but they don't. So for the right price, I take any of these guys. I just don't know if the Bills will do it. Yeah, I really like this next comment from Dried Ocean here. Not sure if this is off topic, but what team in the division scares you guys the most? For me, it's the Jets. Even if they have one of the worst head coaches, when Darnold's on the field, it's a close game. I'll tell you what, this is going to surprise some people. You know what team scares me the most? Miami Dolphins. Brian Flores is a great – we saw what he did to Sean McVay in the Super Bowl. Like, Brian Flores has the ability. He's not some of these other, Patriots assistants. This guy's legitimate. Like, you should be afraid of Brian Flores and what Brian Flores, is capable of. And he now has a lot of talent. They are 3 deep at corner with Noah Ebenogany and Byron Jones and Xavier Howard. They have Kyle Van Noy. They have a Landon Roberts. They brought in some athletes at linebacker. Shaq Lawson, Emmanuel Ogbah, Christian Wilkins. They got some guys up front. Like, those are just some of the names that I can remember off the top of my head. That defense is legitimately loaded. Like, they have a lot of guys.
And don't forget, they brought in Jordan Howard and Matt Breida to lead that backfield too.
And then on offense, you have Chan Gailey. Running a spread offense with Matt Breida, Jordan Howard, Albert Wilson, Jakeem Grant, Devontae Parker. They got, what's his name? Preston Williams coming back. Mm-hmm. That team.
Gesicki.
Yeah, Gesicki. Like, I think that Ryan Fitzpatrick's going to start this year, and we know what Ryan Fitzpatrick and Chan Gailey can do together. So the Dolphins scare me, man. They do. Well, I could end up being totally wrong when the regular season hits, but don't get me wrong. Of all the teams in this division, Bill Belichick doesn't scare me as much as the Miami Dolphins roster does. Sam Darnold and Jamal Adams and Greg Williams don't scare me as much as that Miami Dolphins roster does. Miami's got the second best roster in the division behind Buffalo, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, this one's tough, right? Because you talk about a lot of these conversations go back to like the quarterback and head coach combination, right? That's what a lot of these things come down to. So you look at the Jets and you could say like, well, Sam Darnold may be the best best threat to Josh Allen as far as like competition for the division, maybe even with a lesser roster, but he's got Adam Gase still as his head coach. For me, it's still the Pats. Like, I'm probably giving them maybe a little bit too much credit, but like, they're still the champs until we knock them off and we take it from them. Stidham, he's an unknown, honestly. I don't know that he's going to be any good. None of us really know. We don't expect him to be great, but who knows? He's an unknown, right? He played a little bit limited time and didn't look great last year. But again, with Belichick, I'm never going to discount that. Now, the Dolphins are an interesting one, right? Because they have that kind of unique blend of like, we think to be a really good up and coming head coach and some talent at the quarterback position that we have that's proven with Fitzpatrick and upside with Tua. So, and then you talk about the rest of the roster around them. So the Dolphins are a real threat. This division's going to be a dogfight, man. Everyone's got a tough schedule. Everyone's playing a really hard schedule. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's like 4 of the 6 hardest strength of schedules are all from our division or something like that in the NFL. So, we talk about it, 9 wins, man. That could get it done.
Yeah, G. Davis here says the O-line is a problem in Miami. I'm with you, but remember, Chan Gailey, that spread offense, they get the ball out quick. So it's going to be a lot of getting the ball into Matt Breida's hands. Try to get him in space like he got C.J. Spiller and Fred Jackson in space. Try to get Albert Wilson in space. Try to get Jakeem Grant in space. Ryan Fitzpatrick is known to be able to hang in that pocket and throw those deep fades to guys like Preston Williams and Devontae Parker. So I'm with you. The offensive line is definitely a weak link on that team. The middle of that defense, in terms of middle linebacker and safeties, aren't great as well. They have their holes. They still could be a year or two away, but people have said that about the Bills when they went 9-7 and made the wild card team too. So I think Chan Gailey could mask some of those O-line problems. All right. Someone made a comment about where is it? Andrew Miller here says, speaking of the Patriots, anything come down yet for the filming of the Bengals? But if I was going to you know they're going to forget it. Like, come on. My hottest take, I think my hottest, spiciest take of all time might be the fact that I honestly think that the original Spygate scandal with the New England Patriots was so incredibly awful. The cheating was so incredibly rampant that the NFL had no choice but to cover it up, not punish really anyone other than that first round pick, minimize the punishment, and then burn all of the evidence, because that they destroyed the evidence. So in my hottest of all hot takes was that the NFL covered up for the New England Patriots because that scandal would have brought the NFL to its knees. They told Bill Belichick, you better not do this again. So then when Deflategate happened, everyone was like, oh, the NFL overreacted to Deflategate. I just think it was because they were so pissed off that they told them to stop after Spygate. We covered for your ass in Spygate, and you're going to go out and disrespect us again. I think that's why they came down so hard for Deflategate, even though it was definitely way less of a scandal than Spygate. So the New England Patriots are known for pushing boundaries. When your owner has money, when your owner is one of the most powerful in the league, you can do whatever you want. You get a free pass. Roger Goodell doesn't run the National Football League. The owners do. And Robert Kraft is one of, if not the most powerful owners in the league.
Yeah, that was the Deflategate was like the one time where like Kraft and Goodell kind of had that like friction between them. But otherwise, they're like besties. All right. So good question from Eric Goodfellow. Why does everyone sleep on Levi Wallace? I don't know that we're sleeping on him. I think we're just, we're expecting the fact that they gave Norman that $6 million and he's kind of had that success in the past, that I think that we just assume this is going to be a competition that Norman probably has a little bit of a leg up based on the money that they're giving him. I don't think that anyone really thinks Levi's a bad player. I mean, clearly he's a great story, right? Undrafted Alabama guy comes in and then makes a name for himself as a number 2 corner on one of the best defenses in the league. So it's not a bad problem to have, right? Like either way this shakes out, which at this point I would probably say Levi's third in the pecking order. Like you have a great backup boundary corner on either side. So whether that's Norman or Wallace, like I think we're in good shape there.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question. Why does everyone sleep on Levi Wallace? I think at the end of the day, the guy was a UDFA. The guy, like Josh Norman, he doesn't have the intangibles physically. He's a stiff athlete. He struggles to turn his hips and go down the field with some people. He isn't the most willing tackler in the world. He is a little thin and frail. These are all the reasons why he was a UDFA, like Josh Norman was. But what Sean McDermott is known to do is get the best out of secondary players who might not have the most physically, but have it up there mentally. And I think the only difference between Josh Norman and Levi Wallace is the fact that Josh Norman just seems like he was just an aggressive guy, like uber aggressive, super aggressive. I just don't see that aggressiveness from Levi Wallace. So while I think Josh Norman's going to win it because of his aggressiveness, Levi Wallace can have maybe not the degree of success that Josh Norman had, but could still turn it around and over the course of his Buffalo Bills career be a solid number 2 corner here. But his lack of physical intangibles is what's always going to hold him back. And unless he adds some weight to that frame, unless he can, sustain injuries and really hit people and be more aggressive, I just don't see him ever taking that next step and being a true, solid, above average number 2 corner. He'll always just be a decent number 2 corner.
Yep, I'm with you. All right, let's take one more here from our guy Dried Ocean. It's a fun one here too. do you expect us to trade a bunch of players before roster cutdown day and stack up on a bunch of 5th and 6th rounders? We've seen Bean do this in the past. Trade before cutdowns. We obviously saw the trade with McCarron a couple years back, got the 5th rounder for him. We traded Bodine, got the 6th rounder for him. So there is precedent here that moves like this could happen. I don't know if it's going to be a bunch, but I could see us making a trade sometime in the late training camp or right before the season for a guy that we're probably going to cut and is not going to be practice squad eligible and that we just don't have a spot for, that someone is needy for at that position. And maybe we turn that around for like a 5th or a 6th round pick. And Bean's been good at doing this in the past, so I could see him doing that. Maybe, who knows? Like maybe there's a guy like I don't know, probably not, but like, who knows? Maybe it's like a Spencer Long type that we trade late in camp or someone like that, or maybe it's a Robert Foster. Like, who knows, right? It could be a guy that maybe we're not even thinking about, could be a trade candidate, but that someone has a need for. So I don't see a bunch, but I could see one. I could see one trade happening.
Yeah, I mean, I just made a quick list here. I mean, we've seen them trade Marshall Newhouse. We've seen them trade Russell Bodine for picks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely possible. Andrews twice now said guard, and I'm with you. Whether it be Darrell Williams or Spencer Long, like whoever maybe is the odd man out, the Bills are so deep. I mean, Deion Dawkins is your left tackle. Cody Ford is your right tackle. I think Ty Nsekhe is going to be your swing left tackle, right tackle. But he could be left tackle only if Darrell Williams really steps up and becomes your backup right tackle. You got Feliciano and Spain and Morris inside. You got guys like Bucker and Bates that are stepping up, and Evan Bain in there too. So Spencer Long and Darrell Williams are two names. Philadelphia makes sense with Brandon Brooks being out. Guard is a position. How about Robert Foster? A guy with speed to kill down the field. A guy who can gun on special teams. It seems like the Green Bay Packers are going to realize by the end of training camp that all their receivers suck outside of Devontae Adams. And yet they didn't draft any. So one day the GM in Green Bay is going to wake up and realize that. And Robert Foster might look real appealing to them for a 6th or a 7th round pick. So I got Foster. I got the 2 guards. Jason Kroom, maybe, if he has a big preseason, but the Bills decide, they just want to go in another direction, maybe keep another big receiver like a Duke Williams or an Isaiah Hodgins. Maybe a Jason Kroom could have some value for you. TJ Yeldon, Trent Murphy, EJ Gaines, even Levi Wallace. So there are names that the Bills decide not to keep them on the roster that they could possibly have some trade value during cutdown days, because not all rosters are lucky enough to be as deep as the Buffalo Bills. But also at the same time, COVID, who knows how willing teams are going to be to bring on a guy a week before the season starts. So it should be interesting. It'll be interesting to watch. But the Bills definitely have bait for sure to trade. All right. We are at an hour, folks. So we really do appreciate it. We've had a great time tonight. Corey says, don't sleep on Kroom. Don't worry, we won't. I don't know why the super chatter thing went away. I'll have to fix that. But we appreciate you guys listening. We really encourage you, head over to the Buffalo Fanatics Podcast Network. Now, tomorrow you'll find this show in audio form. On Fridays, you'll find this show on audio form. But let me tell you, if you enjoy this show, which it seems like a lot of you guys in the comment sections do, you are going to love the Buffalo Fanatics Podcast Network. Joe Miller, the Overreaction Pod, it just dropped this morning. It drops every Monday morning. That man's got the best voice in all of podcasting and radio and Buffalo sports media right now. Great voice, even greater takes. Listen to Joe Miller and the Overreaction Pod. That's going to be my go-to listen on Mondays after a Bills game, because I love his takes after a game. He doesn't hold back. He doesn't mince words. One of my favorite podcasts right now in the sort of lulls of the off season, the Bills Overdue podcast with Jeremy and Max is so just funny. Absolutely hilarious. There's no other, folks. There is no other show. There's no other Buffalo Bills show podcast out there right now that is even remotely close to as unique as Bills Overdue. If any of you guys listen to some of the Barstool stuff, like Pardon My Take with Big Cat and PFT, like Jeremy and Max, give them a run for the money. These two dudes are hilarious. It's not the most like football-y podcast. It's more off the cuff stuff. Like it's more of the fluff stuff. But those two are just so freaking funny. It is hilarious. It is a must listen. They drop every Saturday, and you can listen to them all weekend long. Obviously, our boy Casey Reed, the Buff City podcast, if you're a gambling guy. Our boy Adam Nannini and Nate Asper, the NFL Basement. They're always a great listen. And the Code of Conduct pod, our newest pod with Jay Spence the King, drops Wednesday morning. And he's got some – I'm not going to give anything away because he hasn't given it away yet, but he's got some solid interviews lined up with some people in the Buffalo Bills community. So you're going to want some like out of the box, but just crazy awesome names that he's going to be pulling into his show over the next few weeks. So you're going to want to give Jay Spence the King some listens there. The Code of Conduct pod drops on Wednesday. I mean, what other podcasting network brings you 7 shows a week? I mean, it's unbelievable. So you got 7 shows a week from the Buffalo Fanatics podcasting network. That's enough for tonight. I think I'm losing my ability to speak words, but we really do appreciate it, guys. Yeah, have a good one. Go Bills.
Go Bills.